Hello everybody, this is the Wikstrand, and the history of my relationship with Armageddon can be described as the following. When I saw it back in 1998, I thought it was one of the greatest movies I've ever seen. I just, stumbled out of the theater and thought, man, it was one of the greatest movies I've ever seen in my entire life. And then the years that followed, me watching this movie for the first time, there was this perception that Armageddon was this horrible movie. It was just so bad, and it contained so many, factual wrongs and logical loopholes and stuff like that. And it became kind of the cool thing to dogpile on Armageddon. I actually read somewhere around the time when the movie premiered that a lot of critics, during the, media screenings for it actually cried during the movie, but then went and gave the movie the axe anyway. And the years that followed it was basically this movie slipping further and further into the ether, and me having the perception that, well, this movie wasn't very good at all. It's not as good, as the other, really good Michael Bay movies that has come out the last few years. Bad Boys 2, The Island was very good. The less said about Pearl Harbor, the better, but that's a story for another time. The thing was that last week, it had been almost 17 years, I think, since I saw Armageddon the last time. And at that point, it had 62 points. After 2.5 hours of me watching Armageddon for the first time since good old George W. was the president of the United States, it didn't have 62 points anymore. How many points did it have? Well, that's what we're gonna find out today. This is Armageddon. Before we begin, there is apparently 186 different forms of inaccuracies, factual errors, plot holes and stuff like that in this movie. Those will not affect the rating of this movie in any way. It didn't affect it then, it won't affect it now. But there are two things in this movie that I found a little head-scratching when I rewatched this movie that I haven't thought about. And that is the following. In the beginning of the movie, we have the space station and we have the space shuttle that gets destroyed by the meteor shower that, falls on New York. We'll get to that sequence in a second. And I can accept that you would watch this on, live TV and, the broadcast saying, oh, this thing has happened and it's such a tragic and, we'll pray for the life of the astronauts and so. But the thing is, how can you read about it in a fucking newspaper? Didn't it happen, an hour ago? Minutes ago even, because they're coming in so fucking fast. So either the newspaper were so fucking fast of printing this thing that they had time to read it, or this thing moves slower than fucking erosion in order to get to New York. But that's a story for another time. And one other thing. The sequence when Harry Stamper goes to, recruit AJ, not that one, for the mission. AJ already has his own company and things like that, but wasn't he fired by Harry 2 days ago? Has he been able to, to get this thing with the nodding donkeys and his own signs and, his own prospector things in 2 fucking days? It would have worked if it would have been, Harry fires AJ, black bar 1 year later, and then he'll find him and then, stuff like that. But it wouldn't have worked for this movie because speed is of the essence. So we will just leave those two. I just found that to be a little bit, weird that. Anyway, so there is this huge damn fucking asteroid that is coming to destroy Earth. It is the size of Texas, Mr. President. And we only have 18 days before it hits Earth. And it is a global killer. Nothing will survive it, not even bacteria. So what are they going to do in this hour of need? Who can, stop this oncoming onslaught of humanity in just 18 days? I'm going to take you back to not actually a cinema memory, but rather a TV watching memory, because in the late 90s, early 2000s, I had a habit of sometimes, if I hadn't anything to do, watching VHS tapes of my favorite movies, and sometimes my mom would come and watch it because she liked watching the big blockbuster blockbuster action movies. She didn't like the violence, but she liked the big destruction sequences, and she liked the big spectacles and things like that. And she was always good with, you know, the zingers and the commentary and things like that. She was a great person to actually watch these movies with. And when they had come to this point in the movie, she leaned over and said, "For this, you need one man. Is there one man?" And a second after that came this up. And then you see Bruce Willis playing golf on his oil rig. And then she leaned back and said, "Yes." And there he is. I've always remembered that with such glee. And every time I watch it, I just get this warm, fuzzy feeling inside because it is an all-time favorite memory. Anyway, so Harry Stamper, played by Bruce Willis, is this super duper expert in, you know, deep core drilling. And Billy Bob Thornton, who is, you know, the head of NASA, and he, you know, brings in Bruce and says to him, "Hey Bruce, would you like to come and, you know, save humanity and drill this hole in this asteroid so we can put a nuclear weapon into it and blow it to smithereens?" And, you know, good old Bruce just says, "Okay." Because, you see, unlike a movie like Meteor or anything like that, you cannot use a nuclear weapon to firing at the asteroid because it is too big and it moves in too fast of a pace. You need to, you know, drill it into the damn thing to be able to blow this thing up. So, then we have this sequence that always gets ridiculed because, you know, Billy Bob says to Bruce, "Well, here is the astronauts that you're going to, you know, train how to use this big old equipment so they can, you know, drill the damn thing so we can put the nuclear weapon into it and blow the asteroid to smithereens." And the argument is that Bruce wants to bring his own guys because, as he says, they will make fine astronauts, but they don't know jack about, you know, the drilling. And since, you know, his men aren't going to do anything else than drilling, then he says that I want to bring them up instead of these guys, and they're going to just do the drilling. Now, the argument is, why don't they train astronauts who are, you know, the smartest and brightest guys in the world, you know, how to drill instead of, you know, teaching deep core drillers how to become astronauts? Well, I have two reasons why I think that the argument is actually that this movie is kind of correct in that assessment. It is the following. They only have 18 days. Now, if they would have 18 months to spare before the good old meteorite comes to destroy us all, then I would have bought it. But in this case, I actually believe that Bruce is actually correct with this one, because they're not training the deep core drillers to become astronauts. They're training them to survive being into outer space. So they have to bring them all in, and they have to do all the, you know, montages of them training with the equipment. And are they going to be able to get in tip-top shape in order to go into outer space? And will the group be able to stay together? Because there is some tension within the group, especially between, you know, AJ, played by Ben Affleck, and Bruce Willis, especially because AJ has been playing Hide the Sausage with his daughter, played by Liv Tyler. So will they be able to stop this thing? Will humanity rise up to the challenge to meet this threat? That is what this movie is about. It's a very simple story. Now, some people have called this movie a one-man show, but boy howdy, this is not a one-star show for certain, because apart from Bruce Willis, we have, you know, Ben Affleck, Michael Clarke Duncan, we have Keith Davis, we have Owen Wilson, we have William Fichtner, we have Jason Isaacs, Will Patton, Steve Buscemi, Peter Stormare, and Udo Kier as a psychiatrist. I had all but forgotten that, you know, good old Udo Kier was in this movie as a psychiatrist because of all the wacky shit nonsense that was going on in that sequence. And let us not forget about Charlton Heston, who does the, you know, narration in the beginning. It hit with a force of 10,000 nuclear weapons. It has happened before, and it will happen again. Goosebump City. And then, you know, see Armageddon shows up, and then the, you know, title just boom blows up and the movie starts. Man, what an intro to a movie like this. My God, there is a lot of star power in this movie. And of course, Billy Bob Thornton as the voice of reason and the guy who has to stay on the ground. And the thing is that you care for these guys. They may not be the, you know, most complex of characters that has ever been put to screen, but they are funny characters. They are entertaining characters, and they have personality, and you kind of like them. You want to see them succeed, and you don't want to see them die, and you don't want to see them, you know, be subjugated to peril or anything like that. And the thing is that they all have small little mini arcs that we go through, especially Will Patton actually has an almost great story arc and character arc that we actually get a great payoff to. And I cannot distress how much I love Billy Bob Thornton in this movie, who, you know, is stuck on the ground, and he almost looks at the, you know, astronauts with jealousy, because he always wanted to be an astronaut, but he couldn't pass the physical test, so he's stuck there. But he's also the voice of reason, and his spats with Keith Davis, who plays this really cool general who always listens to the presidents and never to the voice of reason, aka Billy Bob Thornton, is great. And the fact is that I actually think that Ben Affleck is really good in this one. He actually has a good character, and I actually think that he puts on a very good performance, including the sequence with Liv Tyler and the animal crackers. We'll get to that in a second. So this is a very basic story. We have a bunch of guys who's going to be trained to be able to go up to a big old asteroid so they can destroy it and save humanity. And it is done in the most glorious way possible. Because one thing I had forgotten about Armageddon, it is how amazing this movie looks. This movie is so gorgeous. And it is so big, and it looks so magnificent, spectacular, that I had all but forgotten how fantastic Michael Bay's movies can look when he puts his working boots on. Let's go back a second to the New York sequence. It is one of the most fantastic destruction sequences I've ever seen. Cars flying, people dying, buildings collapsing, the Chrysler building gets fucked. It looks amazing. It's one of my all-time favorite destruction sequences I've ever seen, because it looks so amazing. And he's so good at, you know, making sequences look big, spectacular, and even if they are over the top, I'm okay with that, because I like things that are over the top. I like sequences when, you know, people in slow motion runs down into bomb shelters while the American flag is waving on the, you know, outside. We have, you know, the light bulbs that going off in with the, you know, the cameras also in slow motion, and you know, the sequences when the astronauts are walking towards us, determined, and also in slow motion. I like slow motion sequences, I think I just realized. And sequences like the one with Ben Affleck and Liv Tyler, where they're hanging out at this cottage and you know, having this sequence when Ben Affleck is playing with animal crackers on Liv Tyler's tummy. Now, that sequence has been ridiculed to death at this point, because people just said it's so silly and it is so bad and it is so horribly written, but I actually thought it was kind of sweet, because the relationship between Liv Tyler and Ben Affleck actually worked, because they have really good chemistry, and they actually made this somehow work and were able to drag this thing across the finish line. And the sequence is so gorgeous. It almost looks like a sequence taken from Gone with the Wind or something like that, which is probably the only time in history where Gone with the Wind and Armageddon is mentioned in the same sentence. But even so, Michael Bay is in full-on entertainment mode in this movie. The training montages and the training sequences that can sometimes be a bit boring, he has, you know, filled these with fast editing and a cool soundtrack and made them look absolutely gorgeous and cool and ass-kicking. And when he's not doing that, he's filling them with, you know, this light-hearted and sometimes a bit childish humor. But I actually think that it works. One criticism that this movie has been subjugated to is the fact that it doesn't take its subject seriously. And I will say that I kind of agree with it, but the thing is that they take it serious enough, and they fill the rest out with, you know, some rather bizarre humor. Some of it works, some of it does not. But I rather take that than, you know, if some quote-unquote good director would, you know, shoot Armageddon. I fear that it would be so dry you have to watch it in the rain or something like that. So I'm not against them using humor in this movie, and also gave this movie something I also forgot this movie had: earnesty. They believe this, even though how stupid, over the top this movie is. They believe it. Therefore, I am prepared to believe, you know, ridiculous sequences, you know, when the children are playing that they are Bruce Willis themselves and rise around in these box cars that looks like space shuttles, or people are praying in front of, you know, Taj Mahal and please, Bruce Willis, save us from this asteroid. It is ridiculous on paper, but because Michael Bay believes it, I believe it. And then when we go up into actual outer space, the movie just kicks up a notch, because then we have all of these fantastic sequences with a cosmonaut played by Peter Stormare, who is very, very funny, who is responsible also for the greatest sequence in the entire movie. Oh, American components, Russian components, they're all made in Taiwan. And the tension is actually there, also because speed is of the essence. They only have 18 days, which is shown by this humongously big clock that somebody fucking built on NASA, you know, for them to keep track on how many hours, minutes and days they have left before the end of humanity. And also, I love the design of the asteroid. It looks like Mordor or something like that. It looked so evil. It made us hate this asteroid. Fuck you, asteroid. We're going to blow you up. We're thinking when we were watching this movie. And the fantastic soundtrack in this movie, it is so great. And dare I also say, there is one more thing I did not expect when I rewatched this movie. I had to shed a few tears. I can admit that it might have been, you know, manipulations of the cheapest kind, but I'd rather take that than, you know, having a ending without any tear jerking in it, because it actually worked. Maybe it is because this movie has no cynicism to it, or it has so much cynicism that I cannot possibly see it. I don't know. Either way, this felt so refreshing to see after seeing all these boring, dark and depressing blockbusters over the years. You actually get to see something fun, uplifting and unapologetically big and dumb. They're not afraid of how big and dumb they are. They almost relish in it, despite the fact that, you know, Michael Bay has called this the worst movie he has ever done. No, Michael Bay, that is not true. That is absolutely not true. These movies are much worse. So, should you see a movie like Armageddon? If you like, you know, big destruction blockbusters about, you know, disasters and things like that, I think you will love this movie if you've never seen it. I don't know how people watching it for the first time now will look upon it. They will probably look upon it and say that, hey, these special effects actually kind of holds up still. That was actually also a thing that surprised me a lot when I rewatched this movie, because comparing this movie to a movie like, you know, Deep Impact, the thing is that those special effects have aged horribly. These ones still holds up. There are a few occasions where you see, oh, that did not look too good. But for the most part, everything holds up. And the pace of this movie, Jesus Christ, 150 minutes just whoof, vanishes into thin air. So it is a movie that people might think is a little bit too silly, and it's a little bit too much of the 90s cliches and too much of, you know, flag-waving nonsense, but I'm okay with it. I've been more okay with it over the past years than I was, you know, back in 05, 06, 07 when I, you know, rewatched this movie the last time before I rewatched the movie last week. And it is so entertaining, and it is just so big and spectacular. However, there is a small part of me that would almost like to have had another director doing the, you know, second protocol sequence in the movie. That is, you know, the sequence when they are into outer space, where they almost have a movie within a movie. Now imagine if somebody like Alex Proyas or Christopher Nolan or a Guillermo del Toro could have, you know, gotten their grubby little hands on a, you know, sequence like that. They could have stretched that thing out and made an entirely new movie about it. And they could have explored so much more of, you know, the trauma and the terror of outer space, like, you know, a Gravity or something like that. But if I have to choose between the prospect of maybe doing that or doing this, I think that this movie should be able to exist and being an absolutely unapologetically fun, spectacular, big and stupid blockbuster. If that is a thing that you think you will like, I think you will love this movie, and it has actually become a better movie over the years than what it was 15 years ago. I just rewatched this movie to, you know, confirm the 62 points that I thought it was going to get. And shock of all shocks, it is so much better than I remembered it to be. I don't know why that is. Maybe it is, as I said, because there is some weird earnesty about it, and because it is so bright and it is so beautiful looking, and it doesn't have this, you know, dark, depressing doldrum that many blockbusters have these days, unless, you know, go the absolutely other direction and become so silly that you cannot take them seriously whatsoever. now that we're reaching the conclusion to this very, very long review, it's probably one of the longest reviews I've ever done, I just want to say the following, that I think that there are many people out there who probably think that this movie is an absolute total shitbox. And I can understand why they would think that, but I was so surprised on how entertaining this movie was, and how it reminded me of a period in Hollywood where they would just do these incredibly big, stupid blockbusters that was so much fun, like Face Off and Con Air and Independence Day and The Rock and, you know, movies like that. And they were just so entertaining, and there was just so much enjoyment about it, and I kind of missed that, and I didn't know how much I actually missed that. But I also think that one of the reasons why I am so much more accepting of the big, ridiculous blockbusters now than I was in, 2006, 2007 is that I've seen so many, Indian movies throughout the last decade that I've realized that, movies like these are not over the top. These movies are over the top. These movies are over the top. These movies are over the top. Michael Bay's nonsense looks like kitchen sink realism in comparison. So take that for what it is. But I really recommend this movie. This was surprisingly good. And the performances actually were also surprisingly good. Much better than I remembered it to be. That's weird. The first time that I saw Armageddon, I think I gave this movie 94 or 95 points or something like that. Then it, slipped down to 62. But now that I rewatched it, I can say the following, and this is probably the correct amount of rating that it's going to get. I give Armageddon 80 points. Sure, it is big, loud, and dumb, but it also contains a lot of entertainment, fantastic sequences, spectacular action sequences, destruction sequences that is better than almost any other disaster movie I've seen. Add to that some surprisingly good performances from an all-star cast, and you have a 90s classic that I actually think stands the test of time. So we'll see you next time for, well, so and so reviewing, well, such and such. Thank you for watching. Thank you very much.